In COVID time, people were really started panicking. Toilet paper started going missing and stuff. People started stacking food. Do you think we could experience a famine here in the UK?
In the UK. No, I don't think so. Industrialized food is in such a way now that food is cheap and so on. What we do have, of course, in the advanced industrial countries, so in the US in particular, is you have food deserts and you have an epidemic of well, they say overnourishment, they mean obesity. People eat really, really bad food because it's cheaper. So they're very, very large, but they're very, very unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's a kind of food crisis. You're not going to die of starvation, but you'll die of hypertension and cholesterol and
Terrible.
other things. So
I saw a stat this morning, just it was a map of Europe. It was just showing the percentage of household that buys over processed or ultra processed foods. And you have France at 14%, Italy 13%, and the UK is sitting just over 50%,
sure,
which is just crazy.
I'm sure. There's some really good work done on ultra processed foods. I used to work a lot on food politics. I mean, I suppose I still do when I write about famine and stuff. But one of the single greatest indicators of a sharp rise in obesity is the presence of a free trade agreement.
Wow.
So when you get a free trade agreement, people start, especially with the US, I guess, start buying very, very cheap food. I think in Central America, when NAFTA came in, it became a very common thing. People would have this enormous bottle of Coke on the dining table, right, which you wouldn't have had before. And suddenly kids are eating these addictive, highly fatty, highly sugary foods. But, you asked a really good question. Would we ever have a famine in England? We used to have, until the 18th century, until the 19th century, actually, food riots in the UK. People, working people suddenly couldn't afford bread. The price of bread would shoot up for various reasons, often because, corn prices had gone up or down, whatever. And this was, a really powerful way of sending a message. These are kinds of protests, right? Sending a message to the ruling classes that, the system is not working for me. You're letting grain traders make a profit. Meanwhile, my family are hungry. So these things have happened in the past. I think that, we saw in 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, there was this enormous number of protests around the world. It was all to do with food and energy prices going up. And governments, slashing subsidies, governments cutting benefits because they, needed the money. It was just after COVID, after all. And people really came out in the streets in a really big way. I did a piece of work with a PhD student. In those days, I was at American University in DC. We did a piece of work looking at the data on this, and there were more than 12,000 protests around the world about food and energy prices. And people are, angry. And then climate change, right? What's going to happen to the food system? Who knows? Who knows which countries are going to be, in years to come, are still going to have food supplies. I think it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is doing some of the things he's doing now, is that fear that if in a very interconnected, globalized system, climate change means that things are going to go wrong in one part of the supply chain. You want to make sure you have everything in your, in your reach, in your country. The UK will be really in trouble.